Hi everyone, as you may be aware, occasionally I post about crazy, stupid, inane and kind of benign people that I come across while traipsing my way through the internet, diligently discovering people that I can find as odd, to say the least. And that's probably a very polite term when I refer to a lot of these people. But there are some odd ones out there, and there's this bloke he calls himself Guru. I've talked about him before, and Kaz, who have a nightly show on BitChute that talk about right-wing craziness at its most. And I thought one of the most interesting things to do would be to highlight some of the craziness that they carry on with, and that to consider, I guess, the lack of impact that they actually do have, but fed by their narcissistic approach to the world, they think that they're right on top of it all. They're truth tellers. They're going to be able to sort us all out, and they're going to have us all rally together to their cause because they are sensational individuals, and they need to be recognised for the fact that they are the ones who manifest the truth better than anybody else on this planet. And they hold on to that truth, but they're prepared to share it with the rest of us because it has so much value. Well, we're going to have a look at a couple of their clips tonight to let you know who they are, what they do, and whether or not you think that what they have to say has got value. I'll make some comments as we go through some of these clips so you'll get a better sense as to what I believe is actually happening here, and it'll give you an idea, I think, as to where the crazies on the right fit. Now, I'll confess that most people that sit on the right wing aren't these sort of lunatics, but there are some out there who just they're fighting for what they believe is their version of what the news is and what is right. So they have a series of these clips that come on their channel, and they talk about them in the most strangest ways. So I'll just come to the first clip of my crazies, and we'll talk about it then. So this is the first one, and it's about a minute, so please bear with me as we wander through this, and I'll stop it when I think that we're at a point where we need to take a breath, because the craziness at some level becomes relatively overwhelming.
Chemical spill. Arizona, there's a chemical spill. Florida, there's a chemical spill. Nebraska, there's a train derailment chemical spill. Texas, there's a chemical spill.
So these morons have just discovered that there's many chemical spills in the United States. And as you'll find out, they also believe that these are happening primarily in red states. Now, that in itself breeds a conspiracy.
A chemical leak. And where's Biden sending the money? Of course, he's sending it to Ukraine. And you know what else is...
Yes, of course. The thing is about Biden is that he would takes the money out of what should be these other areas, which is infrastructure, which incidentally Biden has been the first president to do this for a decade or so now. Put some money into infrastructure, which has benefited greatly some of these red states that they talk about, and which has meant that they have been able to develop their infrastructure a little bit more so than what it had been in the past. Now, the thing to remember about this, I think, is that where these red states are, what Kaz doesn't understand, and it's a little bit sad really, but she doesn't understand that most of these red states have Republican governors who are responsible for what is happening. And yet they think that these red states somehow are targeted by Biden, hence the reason why there's all of these derailments. The derailments in the US have been going on for ages. And the other thing, or two things that we need to recognise, is that it was Donald Trump who took away or revoked all of the legislation that was designed to implement strategies that would make the railroads far safer than what they are right now. He revoked all of that legislation, and as a result of that, the railways have become more and more hazardous. It isn't a Biden problem. That is a right-wing problem.
Really coincidental? Oh, we're just coincidence theorists now because...
No, you're not. You're conspiracy theorists. Let's get it right.
All of those things where it's happening happen to be red states.
That's right. Because they happen in red states, then clearly that means that the deep state is out to get them.
Are you actually picking on the Democrats here, Kaz? Are you seriously would they attack the red states to get an upper hand on the population by killing them? And whether you really think that happens in the world today?
No, well, we just follow the evidence. That's all we do.
They provide the evidence. That's all they do. There's nothing substantial about any of the evidence that they're providing here. They don't understand the American system, and certainly they just want to blame the Democrats for whatever is happening. Now, what's happening in those states has got nothing to do with the federal government, apart from the fact that the regulations that they had were taken away by the Trump White House, and as a result of that, there are more and more accidents. But there's always been these accidents have just been highlighted because of what happened in East Palestine over the last week or so. Now, I'll just go to the other clip, which I also find rather entertaining, and we'll wander through that.
Why you come down here with so many people, right, to nab me? You know.
Whoops. I'll start from the beginning of that.
Also, Dominic Perrottet, he said that the COVID vaccines do not stop transmission.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know when these people woke up to the fact that no one has ever said that the vaccines will stop transmission. That is bloody bizarre. We know that the vaccines will help us in terms of meeting the extreme health effects that the virus does have. But that it will stop or limit transmission is a bizarre comment to even make. No one's ever really made that comment, but this is what they seem to think. And somehow I've lost the sound on that.
Right, so we're right so often, but we're just coincidence. It's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence.
Look. I haven't even watched these politicians, as you know, and another word out, you guys, you took everything. I had a TikTok that hit 250,000 people, and you guys are now stopping me going on TikTok, all to do with the election,
It's got nothing to do with the election, buddy. It had probably more to do with the fact that you were trying to sell a bag of rotten oats to people, and that eventually someone at TikTok decided to complain about you, and you got taken off for the amount of misinformation that you want to distribute. And clearly this is some of that misinformation. Now, this is an interesting one because this is with a bloke by the name of Aussie Comrade, Aussie whatever, and of Aussie Cossack, that's right, who's a Russian dude who wants to advocate for Russia in a way that says basically that Russia has every right to take over Ukraine because they're full of Nazis and pedophiles and heaven only knows what else. He's a crazy, crazy man, and he is Russian, regretfully, but they're making the case here about the number of events that were held around the world protesting against the war in Ukraine. And what I need to note here is that when I did do some research around this, and I hate to say it, I just did some on the internet, but it wasn't hard to find that there were lots of rallies held around the world over the weekend, and most of those rallies were about stopping the war in Ukraine. They weren't about being pro-Russian. They were just about stopping the war. And so they have conflated that into something completely different.
So what they did was the war fist stopped the loading of the arms to go to Ukraine. Here we have Berlin.
I just need to say I have no evidence on that. Don't even know what she's talking about. Now, I also need to say that just showing a crowd of people as protesters doesn't necessarily mean we know what they're protesting about, but clearly they do.
And here we have Milan.
Most of these protesters weren't pro-Russian protesters. They were simply people protesting against what's happening in Ukraine. Someone tell me what these
Yeah, they were protesting against Russophobia. Now, also we've got...
No, there was one banner that had Russophobia on it, but that doesn't mean that they were... I would like to see more information on what you have in relation to any of that and whether or not these protesters were protesting for Russia or not. But let's hear what Aussie Kozak has to say.
Basically, just a quick clip of Britain.
They're saying we want peace in Ukraine. Who doesn't?
Wow, it's lighting up everywhere, isn't it?
So that's the first one. We've got more to bring in, but I'll get you to comment on those first.
Well, firstly, I'm extremely proud of every single person around the world. Proud of the Germans, proud of the Americans, the Italians, all those people out there, the simple folk, the mums and dads, the workers out there who are marching to say no to war against Russia. It is so important that this is happening.
Now that's bullshit. They weren't protesting. Some of them may have been, I will concede. But most people around the world were protesting against the war. And most people, in that sense, were protesting also against Russia for having started this war. And here's this man, an Australian citizen, I believe, who comes from Russia, who thinks that Vladimir Putin is the greatest thing on this planet.
Happening, and it's a beautiful sight to see, and it's something which Australia is now getting involved in as well, because we've realised over the last few years that those people have been fighting for freedoms, fighting against mandates, against the vaccines, against the WEF and the globalists. We're on the same team as the Russians. Now,
we are not. I want to stress that. We are not on the same team as the Russians. Get off your high horse, you donkey, because we are actually trying to fight for democracy in this country and around the world. And it's clear that Vladimir Putin is the most undemocratic person you could possibly ever imagine, apart from this particular bloke. I'd hate to think what it'd be like if he was in government or if he was running this country. It'd be no different from what Putin's doing in the Russia.
Of course, you might say that I'm biased because I'm a Russian background, but trust me on this.
No, I'll say you're a dickhead. Not that you're biased, just that you're a strange, weird individual.
We're on the same side. We're fighting the same deep state that's headed by Joe Biden and all of his corrupt officials, and Nancy Pelosi and the Clintons and the Obamas and all of them that were in there. They're all in Ukraine with their biolabs. We're on the same side. So if you love freedom and you support freedom, and
I don't know where biolabs came into that. I haven't quite understood what in the hell he's referring to. But there again, most of the stuff that he talks about is really rather strange, to say the least.
You're against the vaccines. You're against the big pharma, big tech, big defense. This is the time to look at Russia as your ally and look at Russia as a country which is fighting those big powers. Because all...
Now, on this particular point, though, I think it's important to note that Russia, in terms of oligarchs, power, the influence that Putin has over that particular country as an autocratic leader, is that the wealth that Putin's has accumulated is probably in the trillions. There's no real estimate on that, but there are suggestions that he's probably the wealthiest man on this planet. He gives nothing back to his people. His country is built on propaganda. It's built on a system of oligarchies who are totally aligned with Putin. In fact, they know that if they cross Putin, they will lose their fortunes. He's demonstrated that with someone some years ago who was the wealthiest man actually in Russia, and he imprisoned him just to let those know that if you've got money, I want a part of it. And there's some allegations that Putin will request 50% of whatever the wealth is that the oligarchs have. and that we need to consider that he's about making money for himself. Also, the other thing we need to note about Putin, I think, is that he is a man who has nowhere else to go. If he ever loses power, he will be tried for the crimes that he's committed. If he was also tried, he may also be executed for those crimes. He has nowhere to go. And this is rather scary because, really, he might find that the only solution that he has to Ukraine is to bomb the shit out of it. And the other solution that he might have is to use nuclear weapons. So to be supporting this man in any form, I find personally quite horrific. But this guy here, he does.
Roads lead to them. All roads lead to the deep state. All roads lead to the Rothschilds, and
the Rothschilds. Why in the hell, after all this time, would you bring up the Rothschilds? That's an old conspiracy theory that goes back, and it's a Jewish trope.
The people that are behind making our lives miserable, poisoning our children, not only physically, but also ideologically. So
according to this jerk, it's okay to bomb hospitals, to bomb childcare centres, to wipe out complete cities, to destroy a complete country. That's okay. So that's now, if we want to talk about the deep state, that's probably about as deep and as corrupt as it gets. Yet, for some bizarre reason, this jerk seems to think that that's all okay.
Seeing now this global renaissance, and it's a beautiful thing to see, and it's something which Australia is getting behind. And there are some people in Australia that figured it out straight away, like yourself, Guru, and Ricardo. Both.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to know that Ricardo, Bossy, and David, Guru, Dickhead, are the people that are determining that are the awakened people. The point is that people like this Aussie Cossack bloke are trying to sell us a idea which is founded on nothing but lies, and that he wants to build a little fiefdom, if you like, of his own, of supporters who will rally behind these other people. And I think people like Guru and Kaz are suckers, actually, for falling for guys like him and also Bossy, who are just using them as tools so that they could get the things that they want in their lives, which is some element of power and authority.
And many others, you were on this straight away, and Kaz as well. You know, 1 year ago you were talking about this, what people are waking up to now. And it doesn't matter. It takes people a while to actually see what's going on because the mainstream media has made such a complicated spider web of propaganda and lies. It takes people a while to actually see the truth. But look at this. 50,000 Berliners in Germany don't walk out to support Russia for no reason. These are German.
Whether there were... Look, I haven't confirmed the statement yet. I haven't looked at the information. If anybody can let me know. I'm sure that there were quite a few rallies around the world that were pro-Russian. Most of the rallies that I saw through Googling Realtor, for example, came up with these other types of rallies. They don't mention that at all, I hasten to add. If there were pro-Russian rallies, and I don't doubt it for a moment, there probably were, then let's be more honest. Let's cite those other instances where there were also rallies supporting Ukraine and supporting the West getting involved in that particular war.
Germans supporting Russia, and it's a beautiful sight to see. Now, we have seen, as we know in Australia, there's been neutrality rallies, all around the country. But I predict, and it's already happening before our eyes, that the movement, the anti-vax movement in Australia, obviously it's receding in numbers. Numbers are getting lower because of obviously the mandates have been lifted and whatnot. So we need to stay relevant. We need to stay organized. We need to get the big numbers back. We need to keep the pressure on. And the best way to do that is for us to understand as a team, as a people, as a movement, that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? And we see the Russians.
Well, I must confess, I would probably be classed as an enemy because I think he's a jerk. And he needs to, if he's so keen on Russia and the destruction that they're causing in Ukraine and around the world, perhaps he should go back to Russia. You know, I think that, you know, if you're so pro a country and you can have the wherewithal to travel to that country, then perhaps Aussie Cossack should put on army uniform, join up with the Russian army, fight for the Russian army in Ukraine. And I wonder whether, if he did that, that may change his views. Who knows? But that's my take on some of the craziest people on the internet. Let us know down below what you think. Subscribe, ring the bell if you want further notifications. But let me know what you think about any of these crazies that I've now just shown you. So take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. And more importantly, keep yourself safe.